Good morning, everyone. So, I am Krishna Basazik, Best Practices Officer at wasa, and this morning my presentation will be the application process for the Building Development and Plumbing Inspectorate. So, we'll get into it. So, the presentation this morning will be structured in this way: an overview of the department, the Building Development application process, the Plumbing Compliance application process. We look at some of the common problems that we would have encountered in these processes and some of the initiatives that we would have taken to improve the delivery times of approvals. And of course, time permitting, we will entertain some questions. The development of water and wastewater in Trinidad is the still statutory responsibility of wasa. So whenever you plan to do that, you need to come to us for approval for it. The Infrastructure and Compliance Department of the authority is the department that is charged with receiving those applications, reviewing the applications, and granting those approvals that are required. So, the infrastructure development. This deal with the application for water and wastewater infrastructure. And we'll get into it a little more as we go along. The plumbing compliance deals with the application and approval for water and wastewater plumbing system, which is commonly referred to as the internals of the building. And I think that is the area where the licensed sanitary constructors are mostly engaged. So the application processes, infrastructure development. Of course, there's the application. You submit the application to us, and there are certain things that we will do with the application. Coming out of that, we'll grant an outline approval. You would submit designs and so on to us. We'll grant a final design approval, which is a misnomer to an extent. We have removed the word final. Then we get into the inspections, pressure testing, meter inspections. We do the interconnection for the water, and of course that culminates in the granting of a completion certificate. For the plumbing compliance component of the department, again, there's the application form, the design approval. We get into the inspection and testing stage where we do the roughing inspection, a final inspection, some testing, a sewer feasibility and a sewer connection where required, water connection if required, and of course, again, it results in the completion certificate, which in both instances is the prize that everybody seeks, that completion certificate. So the infrastructure development, the application process. An application form is submitted. There's a prescribed application form that is available at the department and on the wasa website. And these must contain the following attachment: the town and country planning outline approval. Without that, we can't proceed. That's the first thing that we need to look at. You would submit it together with a location map, a topography map. In some instances, a certificate of environmental clearance would be required, but these would be subject to the designated activities order. So that is there, the EMA, and if your project requires that, you'll get it and then submit it to us. And there's an application fee of $2,500 for that application. Once we receive the application, we begin the processing, right? So we conduct a water feasibility. This is conducted to determine that the authority can provide a potable water supply to your proposed development, right? There are certain minimum requirements that we have under the RIC regulations to provide you with. So we conduct this to make sure that we can maintain that. If the project is not feasible, that we cannot provide that water supply, we advise you of that, and we advise you to reapply within 6 months to a year. If it is feasible, we identify the conditions for interconnection. How we're going to connect your development to our infrastructure. That you would be required to lay certain mains and so on to achieve that connection. We also do our wastewater feasibility. And these are the preferred options that we have. Where a sewer connection is possible, that is preferred. If we have an existing sewer system, we'll ask you to connect to that. And if not, you may be required to establish a wastewater treatment plant. Again, that is subject to the CEC regulations, so you would probably need a CEC in those instances. or we will ask you to establish an on-lot wastewater system, septic tank followed by a secondary absorption system, soakaway, absorption trench, and filter trench, or ATUs as required. Um, where on-lot systems are required, we may ask you to do a percolation test. There's a fee, $345, which is VAT inclusive, that you pay for the percolation test, and that determines the soil absorption rate at your specific development. Just as we get into some of the initiatives, this is one area we have adjusted in that we go the maximum in each instance for soakaway 30 minutes, 25 millimeters in 30 minutes, which is the percolation rates. For absorption trench, we go to 45 minutes, or we tell you sand filter trench. It is a way to shorten the process time, so we give you that. And we tell you design accordingly. If you choose to vary from that, and you want to do a percolation test, we will facilitate it. But normally we don't conduct percolation tests anymore. Right, so coming out of those feasibilities, we will give you an outline approval. Right, and what the outline approval basically is a guide for you to prepare your designs. It tells you that your development can be connected to our water supply at a particular point, and that you're required to install, whether it is a 100 millimeter PVC pipe from your development to the point of connection, and whether there are any other things that you need to do, install a pumping station, etc. And it tells you the wastewater condition coming out of the two feasibilities. So this would be your guide for designs. Right, so once you, well, basically what I just said, what the outline approval will contain, the conditions for the water connection, wastewater disposal, and the guide for your designs for approval. So then you would submit your designs based on this outline approval. And the, right, just double checking with this. Right, so the design requirement, right, 4 copies of each one of your designs that you submit on A1 size sheets. Right, and we're very specific about that. That A1 is equivalent to 24 by 36. You submit 4 copies of the water reticulation layout, 4 copies of water reticulation details, 1 copy of the preliminary fire approval, 1 copy of our wastewater layout where applicable, 4 copies of the wastewater layout and 4 copies of the wastewater details, wastewater treatment plant details, and calculations, etc., demonstrating that the proposed wastewater treatment plant, where required, has the ability to meet the effluent quality standards that are required. And in this instance, that would be the Water Pollution Rules 2001, right? Right, so let us look at what is required on the water reticulation layout. It shows the lot layout, obviously. Town country approval, outline approval would have said that your development is to consist of 20 residential lots. You cannot submit a layout showing us 30 lots or 18 lots and so on. It doesn't correspond. So it has to correspond back with that. And that information would have been contained in the outline approval. You show the layouts, the principal drains, the roadway, the walkway, the reserves, the location and size of all your proposed water lines, the existing lines and so on, valves, hydrants, caps, anchor blocks, whatever is required to have the water reticulation system approved as per the wasa standards, right? Then the details. Now on the layout, you will show a valve, which is a symbol, but in the detail sheet, you will show the cross-sectional details of those valves, how you plan to install it. And this is for your guidelines, so when we come to do the inspection, all of us on the same page, as Daryl would have indicated those standards. So there's a meeting of the mind. What it is that you installing and what we expect you to install is documented there beforehand. So we all know what has to be done. So you'd submit like these information, the calculation sheets and so on, standard typical details that we have available. And I think they just reproduce. There are very few changes onto those details, but minor changes. Right? Of course, you'll show the size, the sides, the sections, the elevations, and so on, right? The performance curves of pumps, if proposed. The wastewater layout is similar to the water reticulation layout. Again, you don't want to have your drawings with too many details on it, to make it confusing. So you do your water reticulation layout on one, and your wastewater disposal layout on another. So where, for example, you're doing a larger development, installing sewer mains and manholes and so on, it doesn't become confusing. You submit that on a separate sheet, right? And these will again show you the layouts, the gradients of the sewer and what have you and so on, right? And then the wastewater details, similar to the water details, you'd show the manholes, the proposed manhole details, the different elevations and sections and so on. And calculation in wastewater is always more important than the calculation in water. Water supply is under pressure. Wastewater is by gravity. So you really need to show that you can maintain those self-cleansing velocities and so on in your sewers. And based on that, that's where we grant the approval. It also is very important for wastewater treatment, where you look at the hydraulic and organic loadings of your treatment plant, and that the ability of that proposed treatment plant to meet the Water Pollution Rule 2000 standards, right? And we don't specify the type of treatment plant that anything you propose, we will review and approve once it meets those standards. Wastewater septic tanks and layouts. This is important where you use unload system. You show the setbacks, the minimum setbacks of septic tanks and secondary systems in relation to property boundaries and buildings and so on. That is required. If your drawing is to scale, fine, we'll determine it from the drawing. If it's not to scale, because building development designs are not required to be to scale. So you could indicate those setbacks and so on. Plan and section of the septic tank, and the septic tank details, the disinfection, right? And I think this is one of the other areas. Whereas the TTS 1680-400, the design guidelines for septic tank and secondary systems in Trinidad and Tobago, available here at the Bureau, is a voluntary standard. In our case, this is our minimum requirement. So it effectively becomes mandatory at that case, as Darrell would have mentioned in his presentation. Wastewater treatment plant and pumping station. So these are some of the requirements: a process, design, or brief. What it is you propose to do, and a line diagram, a pictorial diagram indicating how it flows through the process. Pump station, primary treatment, secondary treatment, tertiary, disinfection, discharge. So we have an indication of how it flows. So when we look through the piping, we could figure it out. And then the detailed designs are required at that point, because wastewater calculations become a little more complex than the others in that sense. So, and again, we have to satisfy ourselves that this proposed treatment plant is capable of taking that waste that you produce and discharging an effluent back into the environment that is consistent or compliant with the Water Pollution Rules 2001. So again, with the treatment plant, we would want to see the layouts, the location, because you'd have to have minimum setbacks from other properties, from habitable buildings. You would generally want to site it on the lowest elevations of the property. We require, it is accepted that wastewater treatment plants and systems, the preferred method of flow is through gravity. You know, you minimize pumping as much as you could. We also look at the detailed designs of the lift stations, the operative facilities, the apparatus for disinfection, etc. So you submit all these designs to us, and we would review the designs. So when we find that based on the designs that you would have submitted to us, that they are conforms to the outline approval and the water pollution rules and so on, then we go ahead and we give you design approval. At that point, only then does construction begin, because you're required to have the approvals before you begin construction. There are a lot of instances that do happen, but if you refer back to the legal requirements of it, Section 66.6 of the Wasa Act requires that approvals be obtained prior to construction. Right, so we normally tell you that in the outline approval that the works are not to begin until design approval is received. We the works are inspected during the did it jump somewhere? Right, so the trench details, what have you, and so on. These are some of the things that we look for in the inspection. When we begin the inspection stage, the wastewater treatment plant collection systems, and we do detailed inspections. Those of you who would have interacted with our inspectors and so on and technicians know that they're very, very, very detailed and meticulous in the inspections. Once the inspections are completed and we find that the installation matches the approved designs and so on and the standards and requirements of the authority, we get into the testing stage, right? Right. So we pressure test the water reticulation system at 150 psi for a 24-hour period. This is to determine whether there are leaks and so on in the system. AWWA standard that stipulates a 2 hours satisfactory, and then we do our water loss calculation based on that. So we could utilize that, and we utilize that more for smaller systems where we could get it done in a faster way. Sewers are tested, mirror and bowl tested and so on. We may do a flow test to determine the gradient and the suitability of it. The wastewater treatment plants and lift station and so on are run with a hydraulic loading. We run the blowers and so on, and we test it. But anybody in the wastewater industry will tell you that a treatment plant doesn't begin operation immediately when you start it up. There's a seeding period and a commissioning time and so on. So you may be required to provide, not to us, but to the EMA after the fact, in accordance with your CC, that the treatment plant meets the required standards, right? So after the testing is complete, also for the water reticulation system, the meters, all developments in Trinidad and Tobago must be metered. Whether it's townhouses, individual lots and so on, you must install a water meter. That is indicated on the application form. So from day one, that is required. So all the meters are installed and inspected. The cost of the interconnection is estimated and an invoice is generated at that point. The customer would then make the payment for the water connection to the authority. We will do a bacterial test and commission the water reticulation system. Where sewer connections are required, then we do the same thing, testing of the sewer system. The applicant will conduct the sewer connection under our supervision. And in these instances, for building development purposes, a licensed sanitary constructor is required, where a sewer system is connected to a live system, and that again is in accordance with Section 4 of the Water and Sewerage Authorities Act that regulates the requirements of a licensed sanitary constructor. Of course, supervision fee and sewer connection fee becomes payable at that point, and the sewer connection is conducted. Right. So, and then you get to the price, where when all the testing and so on is done, this is what you applied for, this is what you're going to get at this point. We review the file to make sure that outstanding rates and charges we would not have conducted, because we tend to facilitate the developers in many instances. So we may go out and do an inspection, we may have a pressure test done, and the fees and so on would not have been collected in order to facilitate. So at that point, we come back and we review the file, and any outstanding fees and so on are dealt with, and thereafter a completion certificate is issued. And that basically is the building development process in a nutshell.